You called yourself more of a social democrat. Bernie Sanders has called himself a democratic socialist. What's your understanding of what capitalism is and socialism is, and this battle of ideas?
Yeah, look, I think it's quite clear we're in a capitalist society that has some very positive elements to it and some very negative elements to it. And I think this is sort of consistent with the New Deal worldview. The role of government is to support people and protect people from the negative realities of capitalism and to create some checks and balances, create some regulation. Don't let capitalism be without some balancing factors. Socialism, the experiences we've seen of pure, what we might call pure socialism, obviously have been very far from what I think the theorists thought they'd be, and often have not involved a democratic approach. And I believe in democracy profoundly. What I appreciate in the socialist impulse is people saying, how do we create as much equality and fairness and opportunity as possible? I think that does run through that worldview. But the reason I like social democracy is I think it combines all these thoughts in an appropriate way. We're in a capitalist society. We've got to address some of the problems and excesses of capitalism. We've got to maximize opportunity and fairness. Government can play a very meaningful role in doing that. We have great examples from around the world today and many from the past, including in this country. And I think striking that balance is actually what most people want. I mean, my experience of talking to people over the country, but looking at the opinion research, looking at how people vote, is I actually think they want that kind of balance point. They don't want big corporations running wild, nor are people saying, oh, I trust the government to take care of everything. I think most Americans don't trust either side of that coin.
That's definitely
They
true.
want some balance, some moderation, some checks and balances. So you might be more conservative, you might be more progressive, but I think that's where most people are residing.
What's your definition of capitalism? I'm curious.
I don't have a perfect definition. I think capitalism is obviously a system based on maximizing individual wealth and profit. And again, I'm the first to say objectively, I don't see capitalism with rose-colored glasses, but I can say objectively, look, a lot of people have gained a quality of life, a standard of living that's very favorable in a capitalist system. And there is a strong correlation to democratic rights and freedoms. I appreciate it. I also have seen the capitalist system wreak a lot of havoc and a lot of unnecessary havoc. So this is where a pure, like a capitalist system without some real counterbalance is extremely problematic to me, because then it becomes dog eat dog. A system based on individual profit and the maximization of wealth is going to have a lot of losers unless you put some mediating elements into that.
I tend to see it not about profit per se, but about voluntary exchange and association. That the rules of capitalism are basically private property and adult consent. That consenting adults can more or less engage in whatever contract they see fit, so long as they're not defrauding anyone or stealing anything. And that's basically the operating system of capitalism. And that can give rise to all kinds of other things like corporations or nonprofits, but that it's essentially, adults consensually contracting and exchanging with each other. And yes, a lot of times there's profit. You kind of need profit to keep going, but most of the business people I meet actually tend not to be motivated by profit first and foremost. They tend to be passion driven. Some people are super motivated by profit, but profit's not really the North Star. It's exchange. I mean, what do you think of that definition?
I think there's obviously pieces of what you said that I think are very valid, but I don't think that's the whole story. I think when you say, except for fraud and illegality and all, let's recognize that unfortunately there is a lot of fraud and illegality running through that system, and a lot of it people get away with. I mean, tax evasion and the companies that have polluted in a very dangerous and incredibly insensitive way and got away with it for a long time. I mean, this is not, if you were to say a pure argument that, hey, let's imagine a small town and everyone sort of starts at the same starting line, and there's a bunch of farmers and small business people and whatever, and they decide what they're going to exchange and what they're going to, someone wants to open a store, someone wants to grow corn. Okay, I get that. But the problem is, in a massified world, in a globalized world, like what we find really happens is exploitative capitalism. It's not the only model. I'm not saying, there's only one thing. I'm saying the bigger it gets, it often correlates to being exploitative and so profit-focused as to do destructive things. So I think one thing that's become clear is this is the system we're going to be working with for a long time. Just like I hope and pray representative democracy is a system we're going to be working with for a long time. But we got a lot of work to do to make it serve people better. And I love the notion of the freedom, both because of democracy and the good elements of capitalism, the freedom, study what you want to study, get the kind of job you want to get. If you want to start a business, you could start wherever you want, see how far you could take it. These are really good things. But I also want to be clear-eyed about the fact that a lot of people are excluded from that equation because education and opportunity are far from equally distributed. And we've got a long way to go to really make that a more open door and a more level playing field. And that doesn't mean like forcing everyone to be exactly the same. It does mean really fostering opportunity, because right now, there's a lot of people being left out. Mm-hmm. And we talked about our ancestors.
Yeah.
A lot of our ancestors were left out for a long time. We're proud of, our families obviously were blessed enough to get some opportunity that gave us what we have now. And here you and I are talking to each other because opportunity did work for our families.
Yes.
I know plenty of Italian-American families who haven't progressed a whole lot over the generations and are still struggling. So my vision is, how do you maximize fairness and opportunity?
There are polls showing that 28% of Gen Z has a favorable view, I think this is from either Pew or YouGov, of the word communism. What do you make of that?
Well, I don't know. I haven't seen that. I'd like to see more of what it tells us. I remember when Bernie Sanders ran, we saw some of the first research that said millennials had a deeper critique of capitalism and were more open to the idea of socialism. What I took from that was not necessarily that people were into the kind of definitional conversation you and I are having. What I took from it was that folks were feeling their prospects were pretty limited, mm-hmm. that they were not responding to big ideological sweeping ideas. They were responding to life as it's lived. And, I want to tell you, I saw something that really, really captured it for me. I was out in Michigan. I'm teaching out there at the University of Michigan, and I went to an event for the likely U.S. Senate candidate for the Democrats, Congress member Elisa Slotkin, former CIA officer, moderate Democrat, very interesting person. But she gave a kind of synopsis of what the typical Michigan working class family used to expect, let's say, 30, 40 years ago, versus what they expect today. And it was very powerful, and I think the simplest way to say it was she said, people expected, not only would they make ends meet, but they could have some comfort. They could own a home, they could have a car, they could, maybe have a little cabin, in the country by a lake, go there in the summer. And of course, they expected their kids would do not only as well, but their kids would probably get more education. A typical Michigan family, a lot of them were auto workers, mm-hmm. Or worked in industry. They worked really, really hard, long hours, so their kids could get an education and even do better. And now, the typical view of so many working class and middle class people is they're hanging on by a thread themselves, and they're scared to death that the next generation is not only not going to do better, might even do worse, or is already doing worse. So the reason I say that is I think for a lot of those respondents, they are that generation that feels they are doing worse. Whether it's a ton of college loan debt or other debt, or whether it is that they can't find a job that actually allows them to think about having a house or a family. A lot of things have changed. So I think there is a sense for a lot of folks, say, under 40, that the system they grew up with isn't keeping that promise anymore. And I think some of them say, okay, that's capitalism, and then we want to talk about alternatives, and they listen to some of the things that Bernie talks about, and they find it appealing, for example. And I believe that's actually a healthy discussion, because it's true that the current system is laying people down. It's not just because of capitalism, it's also because of a lot of decisions of government. There's a lot of moving parts.
Yeah, we don't have a free market. We have a very mixed economy.
Well, and I was someone who believes in a certain amount of mix, but I'm trying to be objective and say there's no one place that gets blame here.
Yeah.
But what we can say is,
I agree with that.
You know, what we absolutely can say is the current generations are scared to death about their futures. So they are now questioning the whole system of things.
If you like this clip, we've got more where that came from. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss our new videos as they come out each week.